Hey, what's up, Reefers? I'm Reefer Matt, and welcome back to the Reef Cave. Today we're going to talk about lighting and flow of the Reef Aquarium, and I'll explain why it's important for your coral to have both adequate flow and lighting. Now, this isn't going to be a video of me telling you which lights are best and which ones you should buy. That's not my job to do that. What I'm going to do is explain to you how you can best tailor your lighting and your flow to the coral in your tank to get the best coloration of healthier coral. Let's take a look. Hey Reefers, if you're looking for a community to belong to, head over to reef2reef.com. There you'll find fellow reefers and also experts to help you with your journey along the way. You can even find me, Reefer Matt, there. So feel free to sign up for an account today and see what all the fun's about. See you there. Alright, so let's have a look at lighting and flow. This is my 75-gallon SBS tank, and as you can see I have a lot of light on it. But it didn't always start out this way. The only reason why I have this much light on this tank is because these coral grew out. And as you can see, there's a little bit of shading underneath there, but there used to be a lot without this extra bar of light here and there, which is a Reef Bright fixture. Actually, when I started this tank, I had just black box lights. They're just little cheapy lights. They're a lot bigger module than these little Kessels here. They actually probably went like from here all the way over to here is how big they were. And they lit up this tank pretty good. Just that after a while, I wasn't satisfied with the color of the coral. So I decided to go with the Kessels. And that was just a personal choice. And I also just like the shimmer. Like you can see the shimmer from the lighting. But there's other lights that do that too. So let's get down to why we light our reef tanks and not just use any old lighting that usually comes with an aquarium, you see in Petco or something. And that's to do with photosynthesis. So these coral have inside them, it actually gives them their color. It's called zooxanthellae. Those are actually dinoflagellates, believe it or not. And inside the tissue of the coral, that zooxanthellae turns CO2, carbon dioxide, into oxygen. And through doing that, it also makes sugars for the coral. And that's how the coral feeds, and that's how the coral survives. So without these zooxanthellae, this coral right here would be white. And that's called coral bleaching when you actually see that in the wild. So those zooxanthellae are why we put lights like this on a reef tank. If I can focus in on it, there we go. Like I said, this is not necessary in most cases, but for this tank it is, just because this has got bigger colonies in it. All right, so let's talk about photosynthesis for a minute. Think of the coral like trees. Even though it's not the coral themselves that need the photosynthesis, it's the the zooxanthellae. Trees actually do the same thing, and they need wind to actually move carbon dioxide and oxygen. So that's why we need flow. And SBS coral especially need a lot of flow. And I believe that's because they have a higher rate of photosynthesis. And you can see that in your pH. And that's something you can actually look at your tank. So with an SBS tank, you want a lot of flow. And that flow also helps with growth. You can see this guy here, this green slimer, is actually growing up towards the light. But I have 2 gyres in this tank, and they're just J-bow gyres. I got one there and one back there. I used to have different power heads on the side, and basically they were okay, but I wanted flow to go all around this tank. And I'll show you behind, don't mind my glass. But see, my rocks don't go to the back wall. I left a gap. And that gap was on purpose so that the flow will go around this rock work and come around this way, and then it'll go back through the front. And it kind of creates turbulence going around and around. And I also got one little one right there. And I may add another one over here just for some cross flow. But that flow really helps the coloration and growth of these coral. And that's why I have that there. You want a lot of indirect flow. You can see the growth pattern on this Bacillopora here. See how it's kind of leaning like this way? That's because of the flow is a little too high right there, but it's growing so much it has no choice but to get into that current. So that's why it's looking like that. And the rest of it's just kind of, normal like that. Same thing with this Acro down here. Some of the tips are starting to look normal, but a lot of them, they're flat because of that flow. And it's even starting to die off down here a little bit. So that's something to consider too, is having too much flow, but you can tailor that with your lights. If you have a lot of flow, just turn your lights up, but just remember not to have it blowing on your coral because you can lose tissue and you can harm the coral. So next I want to talk about everybody's favorite thing when they think about lighting, which is par. Everybody's like, gotta have the par, gotta have this par to grow this coral, gotta have that par to grow that coral, par, 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 more, gimme, gimme, gimme. Well, that's not always the case. Remember, you're dealing with animals, okay? Not every animal wants to be baked in the sun at the same rate as other coral or other animals. PAR stands for photosynthetic available radiation, and it's measurable with a tool, and I'm going to get that tool out and show you. But I want you to guess. Now this is an SBS tank. It's a 75-gallon SBS tank if you're not familiar with it. I have 4 Kessel A360X lights and also a 4-foot Reef Bright fixture with just 1 strip on each side. Those are the XHO actinics. So I want you to guess right now while you're watching this, what do you think the PAR is in this tank? Like up here towards the top, maybe here in the middle, and down here where this guy is right here, this is also Montipora, right there, the castaway. So just real quick, what do you think in your mind, what are the PAR levels in this tank? And I'm going to bust out the PAR meter and I'm going to show you, and you may be shocked. So let's have a look. All right, I think I got this set up so you can see the PAR meter and the tank. I'm going to do a little adjustment here. And you took a guess earlier, right? What do you think the PAR is in this tank from the top to the bottom? Let's have a look. I'm going to start over in the corner here. And I'll tell you, it is pretty much even because of this Reef Bright fixture and all the Kessels. This is only a 4-foot tank, so that's the point of having so many lights. It's just to have an even spread. Let's check out by this Acro over here. As you can see, it's not super high. That's only about an average of 220 maybe in this corner. And if I can get directly under the Kessel without hitting my coral, you can see that's an average of about 225 or so. So not super high. And I'll take some over by this Montipora digitata. And again, not very high there. It's about maybe an average of 250 there. That's the thing about this PAR meter. You got to keep turning it back on. That's okay. So you see that? We're not dealing with crazy numbers in this tank. Down here towards the middle, we're looking at about an average of 200 in the middle here. And that's directly under a Kessel down the middle of the tank. So what do you think the bottom is down by this castaway Montipora? Let's find out. So down here, we're looking at about 160, 150, something like that. So again, not a lot of PAR. And then when I go underneath the brace here, it is a pretty even spread. Even though I'm directly under the brace, I'm still getting around that 250 mark or so. So I just thought I'd show you also my PAR on this tank, which I have softies, ZOAs, and some LPS. So I'm going to start off with where the ZOAs are, and I'll show you where I like to keep my PAR for my ZOAs. This is my other frag tank, by the way. I have 2 of them. Look at that. 40. That's where I keep my ZOAs, around 40 to 50. There's 50 right there, 60. From 40 to 60 is about where I keep my ZOAs. Because people ask me that all the time, and that doesn't mean that's the only PAR you can keep them in. That's just where I keep them. They ask me, how are your ZOAs so colorful and they open? Well, I don't put them in a ton of PAR. This tank has medium flow, I would say. It's not super high flow. That's how I can get away with such low par. If I were to really crank up the flow in this tank, they would probably not be so colorful. So over here in the middle, in between, and all these are is Kessel A180s, or A160s, sorry. So in the middle here, I'm getting 40. So I don't really have them cranked up. I don't even know what percent they're at, but they're definitely not at 100%. This Pectinia would probably like a little more light. Turn this back on. That's at about 50 to 60. I've had this Pectinia in at least 200 before, so it may change color. I just put these LPS in here. And this is with the flow on too. There's a little higher spot there. But I'll turn up the flow off so you can see the coral in here. And as you can see, I like that setup I got on the 75 gallon so much that I put it on my frag tank here too. I just don't have so many Kessels up yet. I don't buy everything at once, but I have a lot of SBS coral on this side, and the same thing. I got 2 gyres in here. Here's my new rabbit fish. He's pretty cool. He's in camo right now. And there's also another gyre over there. So the same thing. Lots of flow. With the exception, I found a spot over here that these guys like. It's got moderate flow. So the way I got the flow in this tank is this one's coming across here, and this other one over here is coming across here, and they sort of crash in the middle. And if you look back here, you can see there's a lot of flow right there, sort of where they crash into each other. And that's just something I've been tailoring and changing in this tank, because I want to get a lot of flow for these SPS, obviously, but I don't want a ton of flow over here for these guys. So it's sort of working out for now, and that's just something I'm experimenting with as well. And now for some problems and solutions. If your coral are bleaching, try turning up the flow or turning down the lights. If your coral are browning or greening out, try increasing the lighting or decreasing the flow. If your coral look deformed or bent, try decreasing the flow at the general area of the coral, or try moving them. And if your coral don't look colorful, check your nutrient levels and increase them as necessary, or increase the flow and lighting. All right, so the key takeaways from this video that I want you to take with you is that high lighting requires high flow. Otherwise, you chance burning out your corals, and they'll tell you if they're unhappy. So don't crank up the par just because it's a certain type of coral. Make sure that you have flow to match, and that's because of photosynthesis. We don't want to choke out our corals. We don't want the zooxanthellae to not be able to do their job, because then the coral will get rid of them. They're like, hey, this zooxanthellae is not doing its job. I'm going to get rid of it. And next thing you know, you've got a coral with basically, we'll call it sunscreen. It has no sunscreen in it, and it's sitting in that light. And that's when they die. So make sure you look at your flow when you have high lighting, and just play around with it and see what you can do with it as far as color and growth of your coral. Well, I hope this video helps you out a little bit about lighting and flow. There's a lot more to it than just buying the most expensive equipment and hoping for the best. You'll find that there's many options today that'll do the job and get you the coloration and growth of your coral that you want. I'm Reefer Matt. Thank you for watching, and happy reefing.